My sister tried to destroy my biggest life achievement with a disgusting lie in front of my boss and family. But her husband dropped a bombshell that blew her life apart. There's a smell that a house only has once. It's a mix of fresh paint, the clean, sharp scent of newly cut wood, and the faint, dusty smell of drywall. It's the smell of the beginning, an empty slate. For me, standing in the middle of my living room a few hours before the party, it smelled like proof. This house, this collection of lumber and copper pipes and glass, wasn't just a place to live. It was my answer to a question nobody ever asked out loud, but I saw in their eyes for 15 years. My parents, my relatives, even some of my friends. When my sister, Jenna, was acing her SATs and getting acceptance letters from top universities, I was covered in sawdust in my high school's woodshop, falling in love with the grain of a piece of maple. When she was graduating with honors, I was getting my contractor's license. They never said they were disappointed, but they didn't have to. Their pride in her was a spotlight, and I was always standing just outside its glow. Caleb is such a good boy, so good with his hands, they'd say. But Jenna, she's the future of this family. I never held it against her. Not really, but I held it against myself. I felt like I had something to prove. So I worked. I took every job, every weekend shift, every side project. I lived in a cramped, drafty apartment that always smelled like my downstairs neighbor's cooking. I drove a beat-up truck until the wheels practically fell off. While my friends were going on vacations and buying new cars, I was putting money into an account labeled Foundation. For 10 years, that was my life. And this house was the result. I designed it myself, spent every weekend and evening for the last 2 years framing it, wiring it, plumbing it. I'd run my hands over every single beam. The oak banister leading upstairs, I'd shape that myself, feeling the wood curve under my palms until it was perfectly smooth. The built-in bookshelves flanking the fireplace, each one was a testament to a late night, a splinter, a moment of satisfaction. This house wasn't just built, it was raised. It was a part of me. Tonight was the celebration, my housewarming. It was supposed to be the moment I could finally breathe out, look around at the people who mattered to me, and show them what I had built, not just with wood and nails, but with a decade of my life. The first guest to arrive was my Uncle Mike. He was my dad's brother, a plumber by trade, and the only person who ever looked at my calloused hands with respect instead of pity. He walked in, his booming laugh echoing in the big, empty room, and pulled me into a bear hug that smelled of cheap cigars and honesty. "You did it, you magnificent bastard," he roared, clapping me on the back. "You actually did it." He handed me a case of beer, his eyes sweeping the room with genuine admiration. "Knew you had it in you, kid." Next came my mentor, Mr. Peterson. He was a big-time contractor who had given me my first real job. He was a man of few words, but his approval meant more to me than 1,000 compliments. He walked in, his posture straight and serious, and took a slow look around. He ran a hand over the fireplace mantel, inspected the crown molding, and then turned to me, a rare, small smile on his face. He shook my hand firmly. "I've seen the blueprints, Caleb," he said, his voice raspy. "But seeing it in person, you've outdone yourself. This is quality work, real legacy stuff." Coming from him, that was like winning an Oscar. My chest swelled with a pride so pure it almost hurt. My friends and co-workers started trickling in, filling the space with laughter and life. The house was finally breathing. And then my family arrived. My parents came in first, my mom immediately scanning the room, not for the architectural details, but for my sister, Jenna, who was 8 months pregnant, followed them in, leaning heavily on the arm of her husband, Mark. Jenna was 2 years younger than me, and where I was quiet and steady, she was a storm. Always had been. She worked in marketing, had the fancy degree, the sharp clothes, and a chronic need to be the sun in every solar system. Mark, her husband, was the opposite. He was an accountant, a quiet, steady guy who always seemed to be bracing for impact whenever Jenna was in the room. Tonight was no exception. He looked exhausted, his shoulders slumped, his eyes shadowed. My mom rushed over to Jenna. "Oh, honey, are you okay? You shouldn't be on your feet too long. Come, sit down." She guided Jenna to the most comfortable armchair in the room, as if she were a fragile queen, and this was her court. My dad gave me a quick, distracted pat on the back. "Looks good, son. Real nice." But his eyes were already following Jenna. Jenna settled into the chair and took a slow, critical look around the room. It was the kind of look someone gives when they're searching for a flaw. "Wow, Caleb," she said, her voice just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "It's big. Must have cost a fortune. Hope you know what you're doing." "I did most of the work myself, Jen." "You know that," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Oh, right," she said with a tight smile. "That explains the rustic charm." I saw Mark flinch beside her. He gave me a quick, almost apologetic glance before looking down at his shoes. I saw it, but I chose to ignore it. I wouldn't let her do it. Not tonight. This was my night. My house. My moment. For once, the spotlight was on me, and I wasn't going to let her dim it. I spent the next hour mingling, accepting congratulations, and telling stories about the build. Mr. Peterson introduced me to a potential client. My friends were laughing and sharing stories. The house was warm and full and happy. It was everything I had dreamed of. I felt a sense of peace settle over me. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had truly, finally arrived. I was so naive. I didn't realize that I hadn't arrived at a destination. I had only arrived at the beginning of the end. The party hit its peak around 8 o'clock. The sun had set, and the warm, recessed lighting I'd spent a week installing cast a golden glow over everything. Music was playing softly from the speakers I'd wired into the walls, and the air was thick with a happy buzz of conversation. I was standing near the kitchen island, talking with Mr. Peterson and a couple of my guys from work, feeling a satisfaction so deep it was almost surreal. This was real. I had built this. That's when I saw Jenna wave me over from her armchair thrown across the room. She looked tired and uncomfortable, and for a second, a pang of brotherly concern cut through my own happiness. "Caleb, can you give me some water?" she called out, a hint of imperial command in her voice. "I can't get up." "Sure thing," I said, excusing myself from the conversation. I went to the fridge, poured a tall glass of iced water, and carried it over to her. The path was crowded, and I had to weave through knots of people. By the time I reached her, Mark was nowhere in sight, probably off getting some air. I handed her the glass. "Here you go. You doing okay?" I asked, my voice low. "Just tired," she sighed, taking a small sip. "Well, hang in there." "Not much longer now," I said with a smile, giving her shoulder a quick, gentle squeeze. It was an instinctive gesture, the kind of thing a brother does. A simple, reassuring touch. I had no idea it was the spark that would ignite the entire forest. Jenna recoiled, as if my hand were a hot iron. She didn't just pull away. She flinched dramatically, and then, her face contorting into a mask of shock and disgust, she yelled, "Don't touch me." Her voice, sharp and piercing, sliced through the party's cheerful hum like a razor. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. The music suddenly seemed to disappear. In the space of a heartbeat, 70 pairs of eyes swiveled in our direction. The silence that followed was deafening, a physical weight that pressed down on the room. My hand froze in midair. For a split second, my brain couldn't process it. And then a familiar, bone-deep weariness washed over me even before the shock. Here we go again. She's doing it. Right here, right now. Jenna's eyes filled with tears, and she pointed a trembling finger at me. "He's been hitting on me all night," she sobbed, her voice breaking with practiced vulnerability. "He keeps finding excuses to touch me, to whisper things. He knows I'm pregnant and vulnerable, and he's taking advantage." The air was sucked out of the room. I could see Mr. Peterson's face, his expression of pride from an hour ago now replaced with a stony, unreadable mask of confusion and disappointment. My friends looked horrified. My mom started moving toward us, her hands fluttering nervously. "Jenna, honey, what are you talking about? There must be a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Jenna shrieked, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "Mom, he's always been jealous of me. Jealous of my marriage, of the baby. He can't stand that I have a happy family, so he's trying to ruin it. He's a predator." Predator. The word hung in the air, ugly and venomous. It landed on me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of my lungs. My mind was a frantic blur of denial. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but what could I say? No, I wasn't. She's lying? It sounded so weak, so pathetic against her full-blown, tear-streaked performance. Jenna, what the hell are you talking about? I finally managed, my voice sounding hollow, even to my own ears. I got you a glass of water. Oh, is that all it was? She sneered through her tears. What about earlier, when you were cornering me by the stairs? Or when you were telling me how glowing I looked? I know what you were doing. She was inventing things, twisting mundane moments into something sinister. It was brilliant in its cruelty. She had chosen the perfect stage, the perfect accusation. A pregnant woman's word against a man's. In the court of public opinion, I was already guilty. My world, which had felt so solid just minutes before, was shattering. The pride, the joy, the warmth, it was all dissolving into a cold, sickening horror. I was being slandered in my own home, on my proudest day, in front of everyone who mattered to my life and career. Just as my mom reached Jenna, tried to soothe her, a new voice cut through the tension. It was quiet, but it carried an undeniable weight. Jenna, stop it. Everyone turned. It was Mark. He had come back into the room and was standing near the doorway, his face pale, but his eyes burning with an intensity one had never seen in him before. Mark, thank God, Jenna cried, immediately shifting into the role of the rescued victim. He's been awful. Mark took a few slow steps into the center of the room. He didn't look at Jenna. He looked at me, then at my parents, then at the shocked faces of our guests. Jenna, he said again, his voice harder this time. Enough. Let's go home. No, she insisted. Not until everyone knows what kind of creep he is. That was the line. That was the final push. I saw something in Mark's face break. The years of quiet tolerance, of placating her moods, of absorbing her dramas. It all just crumbled. You want everyone to know the truth? He asked, his voice dangerously low. He shook his head slowly, a bitter, humorless smile touching his lips. You really want that? He looked around the room, making eye contact with our stunned audience. She isn't the victim here. She's the one who's been lying. The silence in the room somehow grew even deeper. Jenna's face went from tear-streaked tragedy to ashen white shock. Mark, what are you doing? She hissed, her voice losing its victim-like tremor and taking on a sharp edge of panic. I'm done, he said, his voice gaining strength. I'm so done with the lies. He looked directly at my parents. She's been cheating on me for the last 6 months. A collective gasp went through the room. It was a real, audible sound, a wave of shock passing from person to person. My mom put a hand to her mouth. He's lying, Jenna screamed, scrambling to her feet. He's just trying to deflect from what Caleb did. He's making it up. Am I? Mark said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He held it up, the screen glowing in the dim light. It felt like he was holding a grenade with the pin pulled. I found a text on her old phone 3 weeks ago. She thought she deleted them, but they were still backed up to the cloud. He looked down at the screen. You want to hear one? This is from a guy named Alex. Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. When can I see you again? He looked up. That was sent on a night she told me she was working late. Jenna lunged for the phone, but Mark sidestepped her easily. He's taking them out of context, she shrieked, her eyes wild with desperation. How about this one, then? Mark continued, his voice relentless, merciless. I'm so scared, Alex. I think I might be pregnant. What if it's yours? The grenade had just exploded. The fallout was absolute. The accusation against me, as heinous as it was, evaporated in the face of this new, catastrophic truth. The drama Jenna had so carefully crafted had been hijacked. The spotlight she craved was now burning her alive. Mark didn't stop. He read another message, and then another. Messages about secret meetings in hotels. Messages about Jenna complaining about him. And the final, damning one where she worried about the timing of the pregnancy and whether she should just let Mark believe the baby was his. The entire party, my entire life, had devolved into this horrific, surreal spectacle. And it was all happening on the beautiful hardwood floors I had installed myself, under the warm lights I had so carefully chosen. My dream house had become a theater for a nightmare. For a long moment after Mark stopped reading, the only sound in the room was Jenna's ragged, desperate breathing. The foundation of her lies had been systematically demolished, leaving her exposed and shuddering in the wreckage. The fury that had been building in me for years. Every time I had to swallow her insults, every time I had to watch my parents cater to her manufactured dramas, every time I had to be the bigger person, it all came erupting to the surface. It wasn't a calculated anger. It was a volcanic, gut-level rage. I strode past my mother, past Mark, and stood in front of my sister. She looked up at me, her face a mess of tears and panic, and for the first time, I didn't see my sister. I saw a stranger who had tried to ruin me for sport. Was it worth it? I roared, and my own voice sounded alien, ripped from a place deep inside me I didn't know existed. My one night. My one goddamn night. You had to set it on fire, didn't you? You just couldn't stand it. You couldn't stand to see anyone else happy for a single second. I didn't touch her. I wouldn't. But the rage had to go somewhere. I turned and punched the wall next to me. The drywall I had so carefully sanded and painted just a week ago exploded inward with a sickening crunch. A spiderweb of cracks shot out from the hole my fist left behind. Pain, sharp and white-hot, lanced up my arm, but it was nothing compared to the inferno in my chest. The sound of the impact, a hollow thud, shocked the room back into motion. Uncle Mike was suddenly there, his big hands on my shoulders, pulling me back. "Whoa, Caleb. Easy, son. Easy now." But the spell was broken. The dam had burst. And in that moment of violent release, as I looked at my bloody knuckles and the ugly hole in my beautiful wall, the anger was immediately replaced by a wave of crushing, bitter shame. She won. The thought hit me with the force of another blow. She dragged me down to her level. I lost control in my own house. I felt disgusting. Jenna was sobbing on the floor now, a heap of misery. My mother was kneeling beside her, crying, asking what was wrong with us. My dad just stood there, his face ashen, looking older than I had ever seen him. Mark watched the scene with cold, empty eyes. The anger had drained out of him, leaving a chilling void. He walked over to Jenna, who looked up at him with pleading eyes. "Mark, please," she whimpered. "Don't do this." He looked down at her, not with hatred, but with a profound and final indifference. "I'm done, Jenna," he said, his voice flat. He turned and walked toward the front door without a backward glance. He paused at the threshold, his back to the room. "My lawyer will be in touch." And then he was gone, the quiet click of the closing door echoing like a gunshot in the devastated silence. His departure seemed to signal the end of the party. It was over. The spell of celebration was irrevocably broken, replaced by the awkward, heavy atmosphere of a public tragedy. People started to leave in quiet, hurried groups. The polite murmur of "we should get going" and "thanks for having us" felt absurd. No one knew what to say. No one could look me in the eye. Mr. Peterson walked over to me, his face etched with a deep sadness. He put a hand on my shoulder, the same one he'd used to congratulate me earlier. "I'm sorry, Caleb," he said quietly. "For what it's worth, I know what I saw here tonight." He gave my shoulder a squeeze, and then he too was gone. Each person leaving felt like another piece of my triumph being stripped away. Within 20 minutes, the house was nearly empty. Only the core family remained. My parents, Uncle Mike, a sobbing Jenna, and me. My friends had stayed behind, silently moving through the rooms, collecting empty plates and glasses, their faces a mixture of pity and anger on my behalf. Jenna, her first wave of panic subsiding, shifted to her next line of defense, blame. She scrambled to her feet and turned on her parents. "Are you just going to let him leave me?" she screamed, pointing at the door Mark had disappeared through. "Are you going to let him do this to me? You have to choose. It's him or me. It's your family." That's when my dad finally spoke. He looked at my mom, his voice weary and cracked. "See, Helen, I told you. I told you for years. All the times we let it slide, all the times we told Caleb to just put up with it. This is where it leads. This is what we built." My mom just wept, unable to answer. Uncle Mike put his arm around me. "Come on, kid. Let's get some ice on that hand." He led me to the kitchen, away from the toxic epicenter of the living room. He wrapped a dish towel full of ice around my knuckles, his movements gentle. "That hole in the wall can be fixed," he said, his voice low and gruff. "The holes in people are harder. But don't you let her keep this one open. This wasn't your fault. None of it." I just nodded, unable to speak. I stared out the kitchen window into the dark yard. The string lights I'd hung on the deck were still twinkling, mocking the festive atmosphere that had been murdered just an hour before. I was left in the ruins of my own celebration, surrounded by the wreckage of my family. The smell of new paint and wood was now mingled with the acrid stench of betrayal. My house was built on a solid foundation, but my family, I realized, was built on sand, and the tide had just come in. The days that followed the party were quiet and heavy. My beautiful new house felt like a mausoleum. The hole in the wall was a constant, gaping reminder of the night everything fell apart. I patched it, but I could still see the seams. Jenna, as predicted, had nowhere to go. Mark had immediately frozen their joint accounts and changed the locks. So, she ended up back in her childhood bedroom in my parents' house, a 30-year-old, pregnant, soon-to-be divorcee. The fallout was swift. The paternity test Mark demanded confirmed his fears. The baby wasn't his. The father was Alex, the man from the texts, a married colleague of hers who, upon learning of the public explosion, promptly blocked her number and disappeared from her life. About a week after the party, my parents asked me to come over for dinner. I knew it wasn't just for a meal. I walked into my childhood home, and the air was thick with unspoken words. Jenna was upstairs, a ghost in her own past. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd done my homework as a kid, and my mom started to cry softly. "Caleb, we need to figure out how to move forward as a family," she began. I held up a hand. "Before we talk about moving forward," I said, my voice calm but firm, "we need to talk about how we got here." I looked at both of them. For my entire life, the family rule has been don't upset Jenna. When she threw a tantrum on my 10th birthday because my cake was bigger, you told me to give her my peace. When she announced her college acceptance at my high school graduation dinner, you told me to be happy for her. Every time, the solution was for me to swallow my feelings to keep the peace. "We were just trying to hold the family together," my dad said, his voice weak. "You weren't holding it together," I replied, leaning forward. "You were enabling her. You taught her that there were no consequences for her behavior. The party, that was just the final lesson. She thought she could burn down my life to warm her hands, and you just hand her the matches." "What do you want us to do, Caleb?" my mom whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks. This was it, the moment to rebuild or walk away. "I don't want you to do anything," I said. "This is about what she has to do. I don't need her to apologize to me. It's too late for that. I need her to fix what she broke. I want her to call Mr. Peterson. I want her to call my friends who were there. I want her to face every single person she lied to and tell them, with her own mouth, that she made it all up. She needs to clean up the mess she made of my reputation." I took a breath. "Until she does that, as far as I'm concerned, I don't have a sister." The silence that followed was profound. It was the sound of a lifelong dynamic finally being broken. A year has passed since that night. Jenna never made those calls. She chose to live in her narrative, the tragic victim whose life fell apart. She gave birth to a healthy baby girl named Grace. My parents, now in their 60s, effectively became parents all over again. They have legal custody, as Jenna sank into a deep depression and was incapable of caring for a newborn. They look 10 years older. The stress has carved new lines into their faces. I see them. I help out. I send money for diapers and formula. I fixed their leaky faucet last month. But the line I drew with Jenna remains. We've been in the same room a handful of times during holidays. The interactions are polite, sterile, and brief. We are two strangers who share the same blood. A few months ago, I went to my parents' house to drop off a birthday gift for my dad. Jenna was out. My mom was holding Grace, who had just woken up from a nap. She held her out to me. "Hold your niece, Caleb." I took the small, warm bundle into my arms. Grace was beautiful, with big, curious eyes and a fuzz of blonde hair. She was pure innocence, a perfect little being who had no idea about the storm she was born into. I felt a surge of love for her that was so fierce it startled me. She looked up at me and smiled, a gummy, toothless grin. And then she opened her eyes a little wider. And for a split second, I didn't see a baby. I saw Jenna's eyes. The same shape, the same color. My chest tightened. My arms went rigid. The memory of the party, her face, her words, the crushing humiliation, it all came flooding back. Grace, sensing my tension, started a fuss. I quickly handed her back to my mom, my heart pounding. I love that little girl, but I can't forget who her mother is and what she did. Loving Grace is one thing. Forgiving Jenna is another. I've mended my relationships. I met with Mr. Peterson and apologized for the scene at my home. That wasn't you, Caleb, he'd said, waving it off. It was just a shame to see what your family tried to turn you into. He's since thrown a lot of work my way. My business is thriving. My house is no longer just a house. It's a sanctuary. It's a reminder of what I can build and what I must protect. The hole in the wall is gone, the paint perfectly blended, but I still know exactly where it was. Last night, I was in my workshop, the one I built out back. The smell of cedar filled the air. I was sanding the curved rocker of a small cradle I've been working on. It's for Grace. I don't know if I'll ever give it to her. Maybe I'll just keep it for myself. A project without a destination. My life isn't what I thought it would be on the night of that party. It's quieter, smaller in some ways. I lost a sister, and my relationship with my parents is stitched together with careful, fragile thread. But my foundation is solid. I learned that some structures are so rotten, you can't repair them. You have to tear them down and build something new, something stronger on the hard, unforgiving ground of the truth.